Children, find your seats, please. Greetings, Custer Community Church. And we're happy that you are here with us. Susan, good to see you.
Thank you.
If we have any guests that would like to introduce themselves, feel free. It's not necessary, but if you would like to let us know who you are.
Good morning, Annette. This is Dick and Peggy Pigland from Mitchell, South Dakota, just visiting.
Thank you. Mitchell's a great place. I have a son, daughter, children that live here. Good place. First, let me welcome Ben Stever, who will be our pastor this morning. And got two notes here that are not in the bulletin. That one. The other is, Pete reminded me this morning once again, we do need drivers for Meals on Wheels. So any of you that are able to do that, please get in touch with Pete or myself, either one, and we'll get this worked out. I do want to talk just a moment about calling your attention to these announcements. This today, council meeting, Pete, that'll be following worship service directly. Valentine's Day, of course, and the rest. You can see there is a special Saturday on the 18th February to help celebrate Jean Reese's 90th birthday. And come and join if you're able. No gifts. It's going to be right here in the fellowship hall. Anything else that needs to come before our little group this morning? Joanne, do you have anything, any announcements? Well, then let us stand and greet each other in the peace of Christ.
Morning. I didn't think
We do have an announcement this morning that was a little presentation that we're going to be making this morning, and Joanne will be doing that. And Joanne is now presenting prayer shawls. If you'd all like to stand and turn around so you can see what's going on back there, it would be good. Where Joanne is going to be presenting prayer shawls to Bob and Martha Schilling, great servants of our church. Let's give them a round of applause.
These shawls were handcrafted with prayers that you will receive comfort from it and feel that the love within which it was created. Upon completion, this shawl was offered to the Lord during a special blessing service. May this shawl bring you love, care, warmth, comfort, encouragement, and hope. With our love and prayers, Custer Community Church.
Good job. Thank you. Thank you. Now, if you would all rise, if you're able, to join with me in the call for worship. Welcome to the Custer Community Church. No matter who you are or where you are on life's journey, you are welcome here.
The God revealed through Jesus welcomes us. We will extend that warm welcome to everyone here.
Everyone here has made mistakes in their life. Every single person needs forgiveness and encouragement.
The God revealed through Jesus forgives us. We will extend that forgiveness to everyone here.
Everyone here is created in God's image. Every single person is a beloved child of God.
The God revealed through Jesus loves us unconditionally. We will extend that love to everyone here.
You are welcome. You are forgiven. You are loved. Sisters and brothers, you are so safe here.
We are safe in the midst of this sanctuary. We can let our guard down and be our messy selves. Then God's love can transform our hearts and minds. We are ready to worship. Come, Holy Spirit, come.
And with that thought, let's take our hymnals and sing our opening hymn, Jesus Calls Us, for the tumult. Number 171.
Thank you.
see her. She really appreciates all the calls that she gets. Please keep calling her.
not solid food, for you are not ready for solid food. Even now you are still not ready, for you are still of the flesh. For as long as there is jealousy and quarreling among you, are you not of the flesh, and behaving according to human inclinations? For when one says, I belong to Paul, and another says, I belong to Apollos, are you not merely human? When then is Apollos, or what then is Apollos? What is Paul? Servants through whom you came to believe, as the Lord assigned to you. Apollos watered, but God gave the growth. So neither the one who plants nor the one who waters is anything, but only God who gives the growth. The one who plants and the one who waters have a common purpose, and each will receive their wages according to the labor of each. For we are God's servants working together. You are God's field, God's building. Our gospel reading this morning is Matthew 5, verses chapter 21 through 37. You have heard that it was said to those of ancient times, you shall not murder, and whoever murders shall be liable to judgment. But I say to you that if you are angry with a brother or a sister, you will be liable to judgment. And if you insult a brother or a sister, you will be liable to the council. And if you say, you fool, you will be liable to the hell of fire. So when you are offering your gifts at the altar, if you remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother or sister, and then come and offer your gift. Come to terms quickly with your accuser while you are on your way to court with him. Or your accuser may hand you over to the judge, and the judge and the guard, and you will be thrown into prison. Truly, I tell you, you will never get out until you have paid the last penny. You have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery within his or her heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one of your members than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one of your members than for your body to go into hell. It was also said, whoever divorces his wife, let him give a certificate of divorce. But I say to you that anyone who divorces his wife, except on the ground of unchastity, causes her to commit adultery, and whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery. Again, you have heard that it was said to those of ancient times, you shall not swear falsely, but carry on the vows you have made to the Lord. But I say to you, do not swear at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great King. And do not swear by your head, for you cannot make only one white hair go black. Let your word be yes, yes, or no, no. Anything more than this comes from the evil one. This ends the reading of the gospel. your presence is felt among us this morning, and that the words of my mouth and the ears of those listening hear the message that you communicate through us. I ask this in your name. Amen. I think the last time I was in Custer Community Church, we had a verse kind of like this. It was a tricky one. First, I must say that there's quite a lot of joy that comes from being able to share a message with different communities, especially Custer Community Church. One specific blessing that I feel every morning that I'm here is when I get to sit up here and watch Sandy play. When I was growing up, I took piano lessons. Well, my mom had me take piano lessons, and sitting and watching her play was one of my favorite things growing up. And so sitting and watching Sandy play, it's one of those lovely thoughts to start off the morning, and then hearing the music is just beautiful. So, thank you. It's wonderful to be back with you guys this morning. It's been a while since I've been here, and I'm so excited to be worshiping with you all this morning. As I was preparing for this week's service, this particular verse gave quite a rise to several very confusing thoughts of what I was going to be discussing this morning. What finally kind of landed on me was actually the way that I teach kids, the way that I work with kids. Last time I was with you, I don't believe I had this sort of life change. Back in August, a principal in the Rapid City Area School District called me and said, I've got this position that I need someone to fill, and I've seen you teach before, I want you to come teach it for me. And so I ended up leaving the Abbott House position that I was at working in foster care and going back to the classroom. It's been a wonderful change. I miss the youth that I was working with dearly, but it's been a very welcome change to be back in the classroom. As I was working with this verse this morning and kind of juggling and trying to figure out exactly how to attack something like this, my time at the Abbott House actually came back kind of brightly here. And I'd like to share a little bit of those stories with you. Well, one story in particular. When a child is placed into foster care, there's quite a few paths that can be taken. Most of the paths, though, are kind of laid out before the child. They're told where to show up to, where to find their place, what they need to do, how they need to be, and sometimes they have no say in what's going on at all. Okay? Change happens, though, when the child turns 18. When COVID-19 hit, South Dakota State Legislature changed the guidelines for what happens to a child after they turn 18 when they're in foster care. And the rule was changed to allow young people to stay in the foster homes that they were a part of until they finish school. So instead of turning 18 and being forced to leave the home, they're now able to stay in the home that they're with and continue working on their education, which is a beautiful change that I really hope is something that's a national norm, because these are some of our most at-risk people in our communities. One of the youth that I was working with, and I won't say names, but one of the youth that I was working with at the time was facing this really uncomfortable time of life, turning 18. For myself, I turned 18 and I was blessed enough to have loving parents and a stable home that I was living in, a stable family with an abundant support system in my church, as well as some really good friends that helped with that. Working in a position like in the Abbott House really made me realize how unique experiences like that can truly be. See, this young man who was turning 18 was now faced with a huge choice in his life. And the choice was to be good. Let's unpack that a little bit. When I say to be good, I'm not meaning to just dot your I's and cross your T's. When we are faced with life's choices, this individual in particular, being that he was part of our foster care system, he had to adhere to certain guidelines that came with being an adult living in the home. And seeing an 18-year-old have to consciously make the decision every single day to fight any natural urge that might be going on in their upbringing, of their circumstantial life circumstances, was really because you're seeing a person toil with what they were brought up and what they were expected to do versus what they needed to do in order to stay. This section in Matthew is beautiful and hard all at the same time. This section in Matthew is concerning the Sermon on the Mount. Matthew 5 starts with that. Starts with the Sermon on the Mount, which is, up until the last year, it has been something that I really struggled to understand. The Sermon on the Mount, it's a pretty straightforward thing when you think about it. If you look at it, it tells you exactly what to do. But then you get to places like this, and you kind of sit and scratch your head for a little bit because it's hard to figure out why do we start with blessings and then jump into something like this. It's hard. It's hard. When you read this section in Matthew, it breaks it apart by type. And so there are 5 sections in here concerning anger, adultery, divorce, and oaths. It's hard to wrap your head around what we need to take from these moments here. Something that I think about, though, is I try to compare what is being talked about now in life versus what was being talked about then. When we look at how lives have changed compared to back then to comparing now, I think of the comparison of myself to the youth that was in my home, in one of my foster homes. Back when we're talking the time of the Sermon on the Mount, anger and murder, crazy, adultery, divorce, and oaths were really big things. They're still really big things. But back then, they didn't have social media. They didn't have technology. They didn't have easy ways to keep track of certain things. And so, really, community was based on the honor system. They really had to make sure that they were dotting their I's and crossing their T's for themselves, because they were the ones keeping themselves accountable. Nowadays, we have each other for that. And it can be really frustrating. It can be really hard to keep yourself accountable. But I think of the comparison here. When I think of Jesus talking about adultery, or anger, or oaths being broken, or divorce, those were big things that needed to be talked about at that time because those were very serious issues that we're talking about with the people of the time. I had to compare that now and think that, I think the message here is be good and do good. Be good and do good. So when I think about that, I try to compare that to what's going on in today's day and age, and I try to think of what Jesus would be talking about here. Instead of concerning anger, adultery, divorce, and oaths, what might be Jesus trying to talk to in terms of do good and be good? And that's a hard thing to wrap our heads around because it can be so many things. What I have to imagine, though, is that all of it concerns love. All of it is concerning love. Regardless of the things that we choose to do in our life or the really hard decisions we have to make, it's all about understanding love. It's all about understanding peace and grace. Working with this young man in my home gave such an interesting perspective on the choices one has to make and how love and grace and something like that can often be the second-hand thought when you're in really hard times. Sometimes you're faced with making a choice that has nothing to do with love, has nothing to do with grace, but it's about survival. When this young man turned 18, I was having a discussion with his foster parents, and we had a very big discussion about the need for this child to consistently choose to be good, because that's what he needed to do, and that's a really hard thing for an 18-year-old to do. I translate that idea in my head into what I'm doing right now with my students that I work with at school. And as you guys know, I'm in seminary, and I actually got to discuss my students at school in one of my discussion posts for this week. And that helped formulate this idea. And when I work with students, one of the big things that I work with them on is the difference between being understood and working to understand. Those are two very different things. Working to be understood is putting myself first. Everyone will work to figure out me, to understand me, empathize with me. Whereas working to understand is putting everything else first. I'm going to put myself back and work to understand what is going on around me so that I have a better picture of what's going on. That distinction is a very important thing to make in a life, and it's very important to make that early on, because when you're working with a kid who is fighting over the fact that they threw rocks at him after he threw rocks at her, you got to have that distinction. Well, let's talk about that. What makes you hurt? What makes you sad? Are you working to understand why, or seeking to be understood? When I was working with this child in the foster care system, I had a lot of time working to understand these situations. And again, reading verses like this, I have to be placed into a similar mindset of I need to work to understand. Jesus' message continuously shows us ways in which we can live, but it's not ways we have to live. We are consciously having to make the decision every single day to live a life that we want to live. No one's telling us how we have to live. No one's telling us the way we must live. It is our choice. So when we read verses like this, I try to communicate it out of harsh language around anger or adultery or divorce or oaths and translate it into my life. I need to live a life that I am happy with. I need to live a life that I am proud of. Even when hard things come, even when devastating things happen in my life, I must live a life and make a conscious decision to live a life that I am appreciative of. To make decisions and be okay with it. Which means I'm spending a lot of time working to understand how my decisions, how my life work, impacts those around us, and those around me. And seeking to understand rather than being understood. I need the people around me to look at me and see that I'm a person who's coming with all that I have, trying to see them as who they are, rather than standing up here being a person that you guys just need to be okay with. These are hard verses for me. They're hard for a lot of people, I think. Reading verses like this, where it kind of calls a lot of decisions and life situations into question, can be really hard as a person who's trying to read it and gain contextual meaning for us. I have not had to deal with a lot of anger, adultery, oaths, or divorce in my life, but there are people who have. But that is not for me to place judgment. It's not for me to place any sort of determining factor on them. I just need to work to understand their circumstance. I need to seek to understand their life, because it's about love in the end. When I was trying to write this sermon, I was trying to come up with a bullet or a name for the sermon, and poor Joanne has to deal with me with dealing with stuff like this. But loving through the hard parts means loving through the time of working to understand each other. That's a lot of work. I work with 350 students about every day. Or, no, not every day. That'd be a lot. I'd still be sleeping if that was the case. I work with about 350 students through the course of a week. That's a lot of people to work to understand. The people who work in an office that are working on accounting, or who work in a hospital working to nurse and care for those who are in need, or even the people who go around and plow our streets, we're constantly